Welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, comedy on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today, and what a high honor it is to bring back an exceptional drummer, somebody who really sort of pushed back against some of my theses in my own mind about the idea of being able to pull off or enjoying melodic improvisation and jazz, and actually making it a point to say that the pulse and the rhythms of that could actually be more flexible and have more freedom within a rock context. And this man knows what he's talking about because he's been behind the drum kit on numerous hit records and a lot of radio-friendly hits, and he's still in the studio, still doing his thing. Gary Mallaber, welcome back.
Thank you, Jake. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
We have a game on this program called Name That Voice. I want you to take a listen to the voice, but also pay attention to the content, and we'll come back and break it down.
Wow. Okay.
Go back to Bitches Brew, go back to Miles. Sometimes when you go and you listen to them play ahead and then do 15 minutes of crazy riffing, I'm thinking that you're saying everything you say in a minute or two. That's really, I get the conversation. I understand. That's great. Now let's hear what this guy has to say, and then that guy has to say. Give them each a minute, and then let's move on to the next song and see what they have to say there. I didn't like when songs lasted 15 minutes. Sometimes you go to Bitches Brew, you'd see Miles at Bitches Brew. They do, in an hour and a half, they do 2 tunes.
Right. No, you're nailing. I mean, this isn't. All right, Mr. Mallaber. He's a fellow drummer. Do you know that voice?
I do not. I'm so sorry.
No, that's fine. It's fine.
I mean,
that's the legendary drummer Rick Marotta.
Oh,
and
the last time I saw Rick Marotta was at the NAMM show.
Which year was that?
Oh my God, it had to be at least 6 or 7 years ago.
Well, he
came up to me and I mean, we know each other pretty well. You know, one thing I could say, Jake, is a lot of the times we, the drummers, we don't get to hang out a lot just because of the nature of what we're doing. And, you know, sometimes we fall into each other's circle. Sometimes we don't. I'm in a circle I've always was in a circle with Keltner, Picaro, Jim Gordon, back then,
yes,
and a little bit with Hal Blaine, and then everybody, peeled off and did their thing and went off. We just, we meet at the river, then we go up the tributaries. Each one of us,
I know, but you know what? It was only partial clip. He talked about going to the Village Gate when he was in a band similar to Raven called Brethren, and he was there, and he was watching Miles's band, and it was like Michael Moore on upright, Harvey Brooks on electric. He had Keith and Chick Corea double keyboard organ, and then Jack DeJohnette on drums. And he basically was talking about Miles would come out and play like 3 notes, and then he would just go backstage, and everybody would sort of. He called it rats chasing cheese. Like, it was very frenetic. And I wanted you to, we talked a little bit about it yesterday, but I mean, were you one of those cats that even though you weren't necessarily going to try to play that music, were you going to Shelley's Manhole to see Miles? Can you talk a little bit about your interpretation of not the modal train, but more the Bitches Brew, and then obviously stuff that Raven touched on, which was more this electric fusion of jazz?
Well, Shelley's Manhole, I just caught the end of that.
Right.
Really. Because I was out there with Van Morrison, out there with, the entire envelope of stuff that was going on. So the jazz scene was a bit different, I saw, from my vantage, out here on the West Coast than it was on the East Coast. It was a little more intense in the East Coast, and it was a little more focused on. It became a much cooler form of jazz out here, and they always called it the cool West Coast jazz, and it was that way. So I saw a little bit more of the big bands at work, just watching some stuff going on at the Dante's Club.
Of course, yeah.
Dante's was a club that I would go to, and I would see a lot of guys play. But as I said before, you got 17 guys, and one was a drummer, and I'd go out the rest of the night and go into the beach areas and watch, 15 different, little rock bands, including Jesse Ed Davis playing with some of the guys from Taj Mahal's band.
Oh, dear.
And I was able to see 14 different drummers, but only one in a big band. And there weren't a lot of them,
Who were you seeing? Ralph Humphrey? Who was swinging the big bands back, at Dante's?
Well, let's see. What was the one night? What was there? I think Nick Ceroli was playing.
Oh, my. Are you kidding me, dude? That dude was a
Nick
painter, man. Holy cow.
Yeah, and Nick was a drummer with Herb Alpert, Tijuana Brass.
Oh, I mean, dude, Nick Ceroli. So, I mean, okay, so let's, I just, like, the idea with Raven, you sort of made this interesting comment about a producer who basically said, keep your ass in a room till you write something as good as you play, or something along that line,
that's what,
right?
Exactly.
But did you guys get a chance to play Upholstered Sewers for a few months? Did you go on tour at all? What was the live? I mean, I want the Mallaber live bag. What was that about?
Well, honestly, we wound up living in New York. We wound up opening up for some wonderful shows. We played the Fillmore East twice. We opened up for the Byrds.
Oh, I love it.
Procol Harum. We opened up for the Young Rascals. We opened up for Grand Funk Railroad, and we played an entire weekend at the Boston Tea Party. A lot of other bands wouldn't do it, but we just said, yeah, we'll do it. And we opened 3 shows, 3 nights with Zeppelin when they came over.
Wow.
I have the poster. Now, since you sent me the email, hello, I will send you the poster.
Okay, so by the way, just for the record, I sent you. Did you get that email? The inbox from last night. I sent you one from last night.
Let's see if I'm.
I haven't sent it to the Mallaber. Anyway, that's irrelevant. Did you guys actually
send it to G Mallaber? Yeah, it'll come to me.
Did you actually go on when you cut the records? Did you actually go on? Did you see part of the? Did you go on a tour at all?
Yes, we were on a tour. And we wound up playing in front of audiences that we shouldn't have played in front of. Actually, that band with that set of guys, with my guys from my hometown, that was really more, we were a little bit ahead of the game. We were more a musicians band. We were more like Tool is today.
Right.
Or Fish or bands like that, where we jammed a lot of stuff. And we played very authentic Chicago blues, very close to the bone, like Howlin' Wolf and Muddy and all that stuff. And then we ventured out into some jazz improvisations. And a lot of times it was really a musician's band. It wasn't, we really, as I said to you the other day, if we would have had that guy to just grab us literally by the back of the neck and kick our ass and just put us in a room and say, look, you're going to have to write as well as you can play. You got to come up with something that's going to connect. And had we played, which I did want to do, had we played a more connective tissue rock and roll, done that more, no telling what could have happened, but we didn't. So that's all I do with that band is just talk a little bit about it, why and why not if things happened, and kind of let it go, because the next things that I ventured into showed me that my vision was correct.
Well, I want to just be clear, because I mean, and I'm with you, I understand that it made, well, I mean, it put you on a path towards salvation and you could really sing for your supper. But I mean, let's just be, when you say a musician's band, you're talking about heady, improvisational jam. I mean, that's Jake Feinberg. But I mean, most cats want to hear pop hits, formula trip stuff. I mean, what does a musician's band mean to that? To me, is in the pocket, and that's the whole problem. I understand that, not everybody's like Jake Feinberg, but I mean, if you're playing heavy blues, like authentic Chicago blues, that seems to fit in right in the milieu of, a half a dozen other bands. You didn't think about writing a pop hit.
There you go. That's it.
Yeah.
You just said it. Because to me, I realized at that time, I said, this thing is all really compositional first. And I'm still with that. Look at the people I've made these hit records with. Big, huge hit records. They're all over the world. I mean, I can't believe it sometimes. But it just proved that little architecture is like, they don't roll cameras in Hollywood until there's a script.
Right.
And then if the script's not good, they get in there and they change it. Well, a lot of times, the same is true. It's compositional. And writing that stuff and recording it in a proper direction is not so easy. And it's not so easy for bands that may play one way and write a completely different way. That's a tough one to deal with. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you got to connect. It's like, look, I considered Steely Dan a musician's band.
Right.
They jammed, they did what they did. But, Fagen and Becker, they did their homework. They wrote some stuff that you could hang on to. That's what I'm talking about. You must meet that point on the graph. That must intersect. That line of musicianship and composition should be met. And if you meet it and do it right, interpret it correctly, you can get out there with your band and connect up with songs that are like, yeah. Now, in which degree you use those rhythms and you use that amperage and you use the velocity in which you're playing determines what kind of band you're going to be. And who's to say until you do it? So,
wow.
I know a band that I love, this little rock band that's been around for quite a while called Collective Soul. I think they put together some really clever stuff. At least they did. I'm not sure what they're doing now. They're probably, everyone's having children and, raising families and stuff like that, which is, you watch a band turn into something else at that point, but that's life. But I thought the compositions that they came up with and what they did with it in that rock genre worked beautifully. And, along the way you get varying degrees of, all of that. Some bands bring in some jazz, more of it. Some bands bring in more blues. Some bands bring in more stuff that's ethereal. And that sets the pace for what determines that type of rock and roll you're going to play. And we know now 2022, we've got 57 varieties of rock and roll. We've beat up Hines. I mean, there's even more. You can't compare most of them. And, how much constructive writing composition goes into that determines how many people you're gonna intersect with, and that's what we're trying to do.
Just for peace of mind, and we can put a wrap on this thing. I mean, an album came out on Discovery, Live at the Inferno. 67.
Oh my God.
67 Buffalo. I mean, I understand that Raven didn't wind up, fully evolving into a lifelong band. But I mean, you were right on the cutting edge with, I think you mentioned it yesterday with Butterfield. I mean, you guys were ahead of the pack. Can you talk? Because it came out, I don't know when the album was actually released, but it's from 67. And I just want...
Can I give you...
Go ahead.
Can I give you some necessary details and information?
I need it. Yeah, I need it. Well, that's why we're talking. Yes.
That was before we did the CBS Columbia record in the studio at CBS Records in Manhattan. The Inferno record was a 4-track reel-to-reel tape recording of us playing live and doing a lot of cover tunes at a club in Buffalo, New York called the Inferno. And we set up the shop and we recorded for a weekend and we grabbed what we grabbed and did it. And we didn't overdub. We didn't go in and clean it up. We didn't say, oh, let's re-record it. We just did it. and they packaged it up and they printed it up, and then the place burned down. And that's what the cover of it looks like, is what happened after it burned down. And
wow.
Ironically,
Wow.
it was called the Inferno. And then they put that record up. But that record was not. It was not constructed in the way that you go into a studio now and really architect songs. That was just us playing whatever the grab bag of stuff was, and we threw it out there, and that was it. That's what that was. Okay. And
now, word on the street says that Hendrix and Harrison heard that and wanted to sign you guys. That's what they heard.
Yeah. Do you know anything about the very first book about the Beatles?
Nothing. No, I know nothing.
Look it up. I believe it was called The Last Cocktail Party or The Last Cocktail Show. It was the very first paperback book about the Beatles story. Okay? The Last Cocktail Show. I believe you could look it up. We are in there because that was during the time that they started Apple Records, their own record company. And George Harrison was working closely with Peter
Asher. Peter Asher.
Yeah, Peter Asher from Peter and Gordon. And we are mentioned on, I believe, somewhere around in the 90s, page 99 or something like that.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, we're mentioned of him wanting to sign us. And that's printed. It's absolutely printed right in the book. You could find it and go to it and look it up. I have a copy somewhere in my paraphernalia, all of my memorabilia in the garage. I've got so much stuff from so many of those tours. It's unbelievable. All the tags of the Steve Miller Band stuff. I mean, I've got all the original Fly Like an Eagle stuff. But off shooting for a minute, there was only one actual photograph ever taken during the Fly Like an Eagle sessions, and somebody took it of me behind my drum kit. And that's all they have of all those hits being recorded with me and Steve and Lonnie, which we've never even talked about. Really quickly, a little note.
Yeah.
All those hits that drove the 70s and the 80s and into the 90s and blah, 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 they're still being played more today now than ever because after SAG sends me those play royalties.
Oh, I love it, dude. Those royalties are just unbelievable. Dude, I mean, you could be feeding a small nation with that. I'm kidding.
I didn't believe it, but not only that, but it's the sum total of everything else.
Yeah.
I'm being paid on some 45 titles.
No, it's brilliant. It's freaking brilliant.
Today than they ever were. But if you take all of the biggest hits that we had with Steve Miller, that went right up and through Abracadabra, basically all that was recorded and constructed with just three guys. It was Steve Miller, Lonnie Turner on bass, and myself. And out of all those recordings, we only brought in one guy, Waheem Young, on the B3 organ, who studied with Jimmy McGriff, and he knew how to play the B3, and we cut as a quartet the actual Fly Like an Eagle in 3 takes. And that was it. All the rest of those hits, Take the Money and Run, Keep on Rocking Me, Wild Mountain Honey, Abracadabra, all the rest of those hits was we constructed with just the three of us. There was no full band. Lonnie, Steve, and me. Lonnie wrote Jungle Love.
Greg Douglas told me that. I love it. I don't know if we talked about this yesterday, but did you have like a Garibaldi Rocco relationship with the bass player? I just spaced his name because basically not much was said. Steve would be like start a groove. How would it work?
You mean on Eagle?
I mean when you said it was just the three of you, Lonnie, because Rocco Presti and Garibaldi, they never, Rocco was not an academic. Garibaldi was to a degree. They just were feeling each other. And you're talking about, I just would love it. Would Steve be like, hey, man, just start a groove and get into it? How would it, because that to me is magic.
Well, the story of both albums, which was Fly Like an Eagle and Book of Dreams, I can edit that down into about 45 seconds. All of that material, I was brought up to Steve's house in Novato, California, and he said, I'm going to get you and Lonnie, and me and the three of us are going to do our homework. Can you stay here for a couple weeks? Yes. That wound up turning into more like a couple months. And what we were doing was literally every day going into the studio, Folsom Street, CBS, coming out of the studio with cassette tapes, doing our homework, figuring out tempos, figuring out exactly what the ambiance should be on each one, and going back in and testing them and cutting all that stuff. We wound up in that period of time, Steve realized something's going on here. Can you stay longer? I said, yes, whatever you need, let's just keep going. We kept going.
Wow.
Steve then made a decision. He said, something's going on here. I'm going to take these 4 songs and put them on this record. I'm going to take these 4 songs and put them on that record. And that's how we had all those hits. That's exactly what happened. He put, because we had FM play from, we had Jet Airliner, Take the Money and Run, Keep on Rockin' Me, Wild Mountain Honey. We had all the other stuff, Jungle Love, all the other stuff that wound up being on the 2 records. And he separated them. He said, because something might happen and we're going to need the second record and we should be ready to go. And he was right. And that's what happened. Boom. Right
Boom.
after the next.
Now,
and radio play was playing those things constantly.
Well, I mean, that was at the tail end of freeform radio. You were getting run on rock, pop. I don't know, did you get
yeah,
I mean, everything.
Everything. And then it went from us playing, Cobo Hall and places like that and those theaters and, then the hockey arenas. And then we did just a massive amount of years of football stadium concerts with us, Fleetwood Mac, the Eagles. We did a day on the green with Zeppelin. It was that massive. Eddie Money opened up one of the shows because we had just finished cutting, Baby Hold On to Me and 2 Tickets to Paradise, and his career was off and running. And it was just complete crazy time. Where are we? What city are we in? Where are we going? But we didn't hurt ourselves. We didn't, damage who we were as people. We just said, wow, this is really stacking up. And we really have to be disciplined in order to get through this. And we did. I mean, Steve had a conference with me and Lonnie in one of the limos one day, and he said, look, you 2 guys, I have to depend on you 2 guys. You've got to be there. Nothing can get in the way because this thing has turned into something that's huge. And he was right. It did. And then we kept going, and then before you knew it, he put up a studio together that he wanted to fool around with up in Oregon, didn't really produce anything. I put my studio together in 1977 in Sherman Oaks, and 4 years later, I had the beginnings, 80% of what became the album Abracadabra, written and tracked, finished. And that's what happened. And it just kept rolling. Now, Abracadabra took us to Europe, and Abracadabra was number 1 in 16 countries in Europe in the same week. We didn't know until Capitol Records let us know. And we said, what? They said, oh, you were number 1 in 16 countries in the same week. No one's ever done that.
Oh, my. That is just, you're like bathing, as Hal Blaine told me, it's like bathing in a vat of chocolate.
Well, Jake, I mean, I'm serious.
No, I mean it's just astounding.
We were not informed of a lot of that stuff. We just kept rolling and kept going and kept, okay, well, what's going on? Okay, well, oh, by the way, they got another platinum album for you. Oh, okay. Be at the airport at 7:00 in the morning. There was no time for anything. It was just, okay, let me correct myself.
Yeah.
When we came along to doing Jungle Love, the guitar part was written by Greg Douglas. Him and Lonnie wrote it together. Greg was there to play that song when we cut that track. And we cut it in like 2 takes.
Because Greg is a good friend, and I know he was involved with that. So that is...
Yeah, absolutely. Greg was there for that. But all those other hits, basically, was just the 3 of us on board doing it. It was basically studio construction. That's really what we were doing. Trial and error, in studio, back home, no break. I think we took Sundays off and just kept going. I mean, it was, if I was making a film of it right now, I'd just be doing quick edits and just, it would be continual. Just, okay, here we go. All right, here we go again. Okay, another album, another song, another album, another tour, another album, another song, another tour. Keep going. Let's go. Keep going. All right.
Wait. Okay. So wait. I mean, basically, this glide path begins in '76, but I don't want to jump that far ahead right now. I want to go back. To now. Rick Schlosser told me that I don't have the story in front of me, but he said that he got out to Marin County, and Tom Salisbury said, "Hey, Van's looking for a drummer," and he said, "Okay, I'll give him a call." He went up to the studio. Ronnie Montrose was there. I can't remember He went up. He was living in Mill Valley. Van spent 2 days on the couch doing just in a depressed state, like not happy. Rick was there getting paid, but they were supposed to make a new album. And he went out with the guys.
Well,
I just don't know. You can correct. I just want to say that he went out for a drink with the guys. He goes, "Guys, I can't take this anymore. Like, if this happens again, I'm walking. Like, I can't just sit there for 2 days while Van lays on his couch." And he gets in there, and Van said the next day, Van said, "You know nothing but a hound dog? Ain't nothing but a hound dog?" He gets up, starts screaming that, and everything from basically Hard Nose to the Highway came out. Now, I just want to know, Van, that's what a genius is. It took him 3 days to get inspired. How did you meet Van? Is there something, the guy was so unpredictable. You might think you're in great shape. He'd fire you on the bandstand, but you know better than me. I mean, can you talk? How did you meet Van, and take us through your relationship with him and how you survived?
That's a whole nother book. I mean, and all that stuff you just mentioned, everything I did with Van preceded that. That's the end of the story.
Exactly.
Honestly, here's the albums I did with Van. I did Moondance. I did Tupelo Honey. I did St. Dominic's Preview. I'm on Hard Nose the Highway, Beautiful Vision, Philosopher's Stone, and then the 40-year re-release of Moondance with all the outtakes.
Oh, my God.
I touched, and the Moondance band, and I will make this statement right now. I don't care who out there thinks differently. To me, the Moondance band was the most creative, the most loyal, and the most productive band for Van Morrison that I was part of. And unfortunately, Joe Smith, from what I gather, of Warner Brothers, wanted to sign the band separately. Well, that was squashed. And that's all I knew about that, because things were moving pretty quickly. I didn't know any more about that. They wanted to keep that unit together. After Moondance, they were sworn to keep that unit together. Well, that was not translated over to us. Like, hey, guys, guess what? They want to keep this unit. What can we do to keep this together? That did not happen.
Wow.
Had it happened, there would be a whole nother outcome. Then things got, because Van's life was that way. But all my work with Van, I will say, I lived at his house prior to Moondance. I was living at his house up in Woodstock. Then he moved out after Moondance. He moved out to the West Coast with him and Janet to Fairfax, and I went with him basically and met him and lived out there, and we did worked on the rest of the stuff. But because nothing was really definitive, and translated correctly, everybody started stretching into other things. All of a sudden, Jesse Davis and the people in L.A. got a hold of me, and they said, "You got to come to L.A., man. You're on board. You're going to be on board everything." And they were right. My recording career started in '73 in L.A., and I lived at Jesse Davis's house, a superb, wonderful human being, Indian, half Kiowa, half Comanche. As a matter of fact, right now they're writing a book about Jesse Davis. Lovely human being. and hung out with that entire crowd from Tulsa and all the people that were involved in that. And then all of a sudden, the recording lights just went crazy. And it went crazy for everyone. It was crazy for Keltner. It was crazy for Porcaro, for Jim Gordon, before Jim went off what he did, unfortunately. And then for me, it just went from, wow. Then I went on tour with Joe Walsh and Barnstorm, and he was a ball. But Van Morrison was always very congenial to me. And I always brought something to the table. And Van always met that with a yes. Moondance was yes, do it. Van, I got an idea. Yes, do it. I want to put the vibraphones on that beautiful song you just wrote called Crazy Love. Can I? Yes, do it. Always, yes, go, do it. Everything you're playing, I'm loving it. It's playing back beautiful. Keep going. But here's what happened. Because everything was not translated over to us correctly, everything began to fragment, okay? I went, and all of a sudden, the fires lit for me in L.A., and before you knew it, I was off working at A&M Records with Paul Williams, who was doing massive amounts of writing and recording and film projects. And then, in between that, out with Joe Walsh, out with Jackson Browne. I was in Jackson Browne's band for a while. And I met up with Steve Miller before that. He wanted me to jump in his band. And I said, Steve, I can't make a move. I've got to stay here in L.A. And then little fragments came around with Van Morrison again. And before I knew it, 1974, we were doing homework with Steve and me and Lonnie, and it was like, that's it. Done. We go from here.
Okay, so
and then still in between everything with Steve, there was time to do Eddie Money and Bonnie Raitt and keep going.
I just want to be clear that they wanted, like, the section with Cooch, Sklar, Kunkel, Durkee. They wanted to make that with Labus, Klingberg, Mallaber, and Schroer. Mallaber.
And, yeah.
I'm sorry, dude. Yeah. They've spelled.
Yeah,
they've butchered.
And John Platani. Yeah. With Jeff Labes and Klingberg, John Platani, and me. Yes, we could have stayed on board with Van and just kept slugging it out. It would have been wonderful. And our two horn players, they came up with those wonderful parts. Colin and John.
Yeah.
Just wonderful stuff. It was a wonderful band, and it played beautiful live.
I just want to be also clear. You're telling me that you were chewing the fat with Chuck Blackwell and Jimmy Karstein and Leon Russell and those cats? Me
and Jimmy Karstein were living in Jesse Ed Davis's garage studio.
Oh, this is unbelievable.
At the same time.
Freaking love Jimmy Karstein. I did an amazing interview with that cat.
Yeah, and Jimmy disappeared. And I said, Jimmy, I'm all of a sudden I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And then, if I could explain, that was a very, very chaotic time.
Yeah.
I mean, the Cosmos, as far as recording was going, the Cosmos was just on fire.
Fire.
The atoms were flying through the room, and, there was isotopes colliding, and there were new forms of life coming out through the cosmos. I mean, it was just nothing was sitting still. If I could explain it to you. I mean, Laurel Canyon was happening with everybody there. The beginnings of the Eagles was beginning to form. Jackson Browne's band, everybody at Lowell George and Little Feat. I mean, everything was in the pot, boiling away. You get it? It was like, wow.
Okay. Well, my question, I have to ask you, when did you officially get cartage when you got out there?
Oh, my God, you had to do it right away. You had to get two things. First, you had to get an answering service because, of course, we didn't have the technology we have now. So we had to get an answering service connected to your phone to take your calls. And then there was so much going on in the studios, and I realized, the record companies are covering for the cartage from drums being transported from studio to studio. And that happened in 72, 73. Immediately, cartage started, and I had 4 kits of drums, all marked. And there would be some days that would be like, you'd be set up in one studio, they'd set you up in another studio, then you just drive to the next studio. It was like that for Hal Blaine, and it was like that for us too. In most of the 70s, Keltner will tell you. And so I didn't see Jimmy Karstein a lot in the studios. The studios guys I saw a lot was Picaro and Kelton. As a matter of fact, me and Jeff used to just, trade, hellos and funny anecdotes. One day, me and Jimmy yelled to each other across the parking lot, something, kind of making fun of each other's recording.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah. I love you and Keltner are the. Oh my God, I love it.
Yeah.
Man.
Hey, when are you going to learn how to hold a stick right? Stuff like that.
Wait, hold on. Though. But here's the thing. You explain this though. So you were recording with Steve Miller right during before the '76 run with.
Oh my God! No, I started with Steve in '71.
So you must have crossed. Did you hang it like the lion's share with Van? He was playing like 20-minute My Funny Valentine's.
When Van went up, when we went out there, a couple of the gigs were right at the lion's share, right in San Anselmo, San Rafael.
Oh my God.
I was living in Corte Madera. I then got a little place over in Corte Madera, and I was up there. But then L.A. started calling, and it was like, well, okay, if we're not going to do something, either I'm going to go back to my hometown and play for a weekend, or I'm going to be in L.A. and blah, blah, blah. And, that's how we did that. But, yes, all of that happened. All of that took place. Things were moving very quickly. I do have calendars from those periods of time that I can show you.
Well, no, because I want to get because you're on this very amazing album because Sidran was very involved with that early Miller stuff. Feel the Groove. That was like a really intense.
That's me and Keltner together.
You played double drums with Keltner on that.
Yes, I did.
Oh my God! I did not know that.
Now listen. Now you'll find it. It's on there. Ben Sidran was instrumental in bringing me into the Steve Miller Band pack. He wrote Space Cowboy with Steve, and I first did the album Journey from Eden, Recall the Beginning, in '71 at Capitol Tower with Steve. About a year later, Steve called to ask me if I wanted to be in his band. I said, I would love to be, Steve, but right now I cannot walk away from what's going on here in L.A. And he understood. I said, Steve, I am booked 4 sessions a day. It's just coming off the walls. I was doing behind the scenes playing for a lot of bands that I will not even talk about.
Were you?
I won't even say.
Wait, were you doing can you just explain? Like you would walk in before the sun came up and leave when the sun went. Before you never even see the sun.
Well, sometimes it wouldn't be that treacherous, but there would be a lot of times it's like, okay, what are we doing? What's the feel? Who's, give me something to go on. Am I going to hear a vocal to play off of? That's what I told. Look, that's a key point you just brought up.
Yeah.
When you have a vocal going on and you have the syllables coming at you, spewing out not just the words, but the rhythm of the words.
Yes.
Your playing becomes much more precise as to what you're going to do. That's what I did with Van, because what you're hearing on those records, people don't believe. You're hearing Van sing it for real once. I never, ever saw Van go in and overdub a vocal for 2 days. No way, Jose.
Wow.
Were you going to get that?
Wow.
Those vocals are real. That is it. And people don't believe it. They go, well, what do you mean? What I mean is what he did is what he did. He didn't go back in and fix a line. Unheard of. No way would that happen. Not with him. There was no such thing.
That was just emblematic of that time. Even other types of singers, not in the same vein, but they'd go in. I mean, I'm gonna, I think it's fair to put Van in a, Sinatra. These guys would knock it out one time. There'd be no redos, no overdubs, no.
Unless there was something tragic that happened.
Of course,
to somebody else.
of course, but otherwise they just kept it. Yeah.
Look, you can go back to the greatest hits of Little Richard, and there's a song, and I did this, and I played those things over and over again, and I just go, my God, what they did. They did it right on the spot. There was one song toward the end of his greatest hits. I've got it out in the car. I play it all the time. He ran out of breath, and they kept going.
Of course they did.
And he caught up later.
I love it. I freaking love it, dude.
They kept the tape. I mean, that's the era that you were in. And they kept the take. And whoever was engineering that record and where they put those instruments should be given, an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar. Find him and talk about him. Because to me, he made that work. He was one of the instrumental guys in making rock and roll go. That's what we talked about when we used to say, who were the artists that made this thing go? Well, hey, you could count them on two hands, really. If you do, take the first 5 years, but don't leave out the guys that captured their sound because they were all they had. Remember, those records were on the spot. There was no going back and changing the hi-hat.
Jesus. I mean,
like you can do today with this nonsense.
Nonsense.
It's like, no. Not only did they play for real right then and there, but it was captured for real. And guess what? That was the mix. So now try to flow that around your body chemistry a little bit and see how you feel. Just put yourself in that era of time and go, really? Did that happen? Yeah, it happened just like that.
You segued. You're just reading my mind because I got another name, that voice. But the story he tells is going to is perfect segue into what you're talking about. So take a listen. We'll come back.
Okay.
Well, Billy called me up and he said that he got a record deal and he wanted to know if I could come to New York to work on his album. And I said, "Geez, are you kidding? I would love to." And pretty much, other than 2 tracks that were done with a big band on there, and Ron Carter played bass on those 2 tracks, all the rest of the tracks we did in 2 days. The whole album took 2 days, and it's pretty much 1 or 2 takes of each track, and they were all cut live. There's no overdubs, no fixes. And as a matter of fact, I think there's a track called Tarian Matador, and Jan Hammer and Tommy Bolin trade licks back and forth. And at one point, if you're listening to the record, you hear Tommy bending up to a lick going, and you hear, and he broke his E string in the middle of his solo, and he just went right on playing, finished the whole thing, played the head, and finished the song, and they never went in and fixed it, so the broken string is on the album.
Gary Mallaber, you want to take a guess at who that is?
Wow. I have to apologize. As
it's
I
okay.
Said
This
before,
is a very hard game.
Guys,
this is a hard game.
Well, a very hard game, but a lot of us guys, the drum circle, we don't really get to really meet each other. I mean, yeah, no, I know J.R. Robinson because he lives out here.
Sure.
And we hung out together a little bit, so obviously I know JR. But
well, no, I'm not. This guy's not a drummer. He's a guy that I know you played with probably less than probably because he was in part. That was my interview with Leland Sklar.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Well, how long ago did you do that interview?
Well, that interview was, and a lot of times they sound different on the phone. I've done 6 interviews with Sklar. That was done like 6 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, no. So the point is, I want to give you a back. This leads into my question. The Billy Cobham had an first album called Spectrum, and he brought in Bolin and Sklar, Stanley Clarke, Too Much Language with Billy. So it was kind of a rock fusion album. And there's this song Tarian Matador. Bolin breaks the E string, continues to play, and they didn't replace it. And I'm like, I got to talk to Mallaber. Can you talk about something in this? I know we just went through this but everything was blissful with Miller. Was there a clam in the studio that was kept in Mallaber's?
Well, I did that several times. That I wasn't sure if the fill or the riff was going to be accepted. It wasn't actually what we would say a clam, but it was, I reached for something and I was like, boy, I hope Van likes it. From the album Moondance, we had a song on there called Brand New Day, and he does his vocals live, and I just play up underneath it. And he did something, and I answered him on the vocal. And after we finished and we came into the room, I said, "Are you okay with that?" He goes, "Oh yeah." And then the other song wasn't actually technically a clam situation. That actually never really happened with him on any of the recordings. But it was a situation, I've told this a few times to people, where as we finished the track, Crazy Love, which was that very soft R&B kind of halfway ballad, and a lovely piece of material, lovely song, well written, and beautifully we performed. And we came back into the room, we were listening to playback, and I noticed that this is studio in New York City at A&R Studio in New York, and Elliot Shiner was the engineer on it, and I noticed that they had left a beautiful vibraphone from studio instrument rental there.
Yeah.
They didn't take it back. It was still in the studio. And I took the cover off it, and I just looked at Elliot, and I said, God, this song is screaming for vibraphones to be on board. So I looked at it, and I asked Van, I said, could I put a track on and he was gracious and wonderful. He said, oh, yeah, please do it. Go ahead. So we set up a stereo miking on it, and I did it. But after we set it up, I went to look for the mallets, the vibraphone mallets, the soft pair to play the part with. I was going to use I use a 4 mallet technique,
wow.
But maybe just 3.
Wow.
But there were no mallets, only the vibraphone. So I said to Elliot, oh, man, what am I going to do here? We got to get this on board because they may come and take it away at any moment. So let's do this. So I said, is there a storage room or is there a repair room? And I went in there, and luckily there was a big toolkit. And inside it, lo and behold, I found some Craftsman screwdrivers, long ones, with rubber handles.
Oh, my God.
So the vibraphone part on Crazy Love was played with screwdrivers.
I'm sorry. That's better than any clam possible. That's unbelievable.
True story. So now when you listen to that beautiful piece of music, which, by the way, the vibraphones come right in, and it was just lovely, perfect for the track. Elliot agreed. And when I stayed behind, Elliot said, well, you want to stay? You can stay in town? I said, I'd love to. I don't want to go up to Woodstock. I'd rather stay here. And he goes, okay, help me mix. And I did. So Elliot gave me credit for mixing in every story he tells about that album. And we did. And when we came to that song, I sort of kept pushing up the vibraphone and saying, it could take a little bit more of this. It's a beautiful tonality. We're not playing jazz riffs. I'm just putting a color up underneath the song, and I think it's just absolutely screaming for it. Well, we finally got it to be where the vibraphone is predominant, and that's what you hear.
This is really important because it's one of my favorite instruments, and you became the seminal rock vibraphone player, and at least in studio. We're not talking about bags, although I will say that Emil Richards, when he was in New York in the 50s, he would always go see Milt, and Milt had his old vibes, and they were really beat up and kind of sorry looking, but yet he got this sound. I think they were called Deegan or something, some kind of vibes. They
were Deegan.
Deegan. He got this sound. It was incredible. And I'm on the phone with David Friedman, the great vibes player, the other day, and he said that he was at a festival, and he was playing a Yamaha set of vibes, and the producer of the festival came up and said, "Hey, would you mind if Milt borrowed your vibes?" And Friedman's like, "Are you kidding me? Of course." But he's like, "Dude, my mallets are much harder and bigger. I don't have the Deegan vibes. What's going to happen here?" And he said Milt took the vibes, he took the mallets, and within 4 bars, he sounded just like Milt Jackson. And I just...
Wow.
Mallaber, I want you to I know this is going a little bit out there, but I just want you to talk about the ability to project your soul through the instrument, because there are I'm sure you went on tour sometimes, especially with Raven or cats, you'd show up, you didn't have cats like Joe Sample would show up, they'd have missing piano keys, they'd have to bang the thing back into tune, but yet the projection of soul brought out their sound. And I just wanted you to talk. Yeah. I wanted you to talk about that, because people think they have to generate sonic expansion through playing loud, but it's actually through soul. And I'd like you to talk about that.
Yeah, it's your finesse. So I'm always reading the song. Now you go back to the history of the vibraphone. We're talking about you're talking about Lionel Hampton.
Right.
You're talking about the Gene Krupa trio with Lionel Hampton and Charlie Ventura, who, by the way, from what my family told me, may be related to me, because the Ventura family is my mom's side, and evidently my mom's dad, older brother, there might be a cousin off of that line. Okay, enough of that. Let's go forward to vibraphone. So if that is trailing through me, wonderful, because that was the Gene Krupa trio. It was Gene and Charlie and Lionel Hampton. And but the technique back then was a fast rotation on the instrument. And by the way, Deegan vibraphone bells are different than the Musser vibraphone bells. Those were the two main groupings of vibraphones. I went with the Musser. I wanted more tonality and less. I was going to not riff, but I was going to use the instrument in a slow rotation, so the Doppler would be much slower, much warmer, and a much softer mallet. And that's exactly what I did, except for that song. So that was Craftsman. Craftsman. Made by Craftsman. Yes, I told the people at Regal Tip about that one. I said, yes, the mallets were Craftsman, and true story. But I had to make it work, and it did work. But once again, you read the song, the Lionel Hampton days, the Milt Jackson days, everything, Gary Burton, everything, we're talking jazz, we're talking incredible riffing and stuff. That's not what I was doing. I was reading the song, and I said, we're going to put a tonality up underneath that thing, and I'm going to use the vibraphone and push it way up, and just everybody could hear that soft rotation. It'll mellow, be exactly in parallel to the song, which will mellow everybody out. So now when you hear it, that's what it does. But always a good percussionist can feel the stick or the mallet through his hands, and he will adjust accordingly, depending on his talent. You could feel it like a great baseball player will feel the bat through his hands and adjust. You will feel your sticks and your mallets right through your hands after you've been doing it for, decades. It's automatic. I could feel a stick if it's hollow, and I know where the hollow point is, and I put it down, and I could adjust the same way in my hit power from the vibraphone mallet, and those gentlemen that you mentioned certainly had that ability to do that.
Do you think that word finesse, how much of the fact that you were basically, in the raw days, Buffalo, tri-state area, Utica, these, let's face it, you were playing out of antiquated PA systems, and quite frankly, if you had organ, guitar, those cats were mic'd, the drums were not. So, there was dynamics, just natural dynamics, and I don't hear... And I just wonder if you think that maybe this is the better question, how can younger cats develop dynamics to be able to understand finesse? Because I just see people just wanking, just hammering away, thinking that that's somehow going to feel good to the listener. And I just think that word, I just feel like, do you believe that the fact that you were playing through antiquated PA systems, and quite frankly, you were not always mic'd up, that you had to, finesse came easier for you?
Well, and I'm not dictating any rule. I'm not setting up an edict, or it has to be this way or it doesn't. But The guys that seem to develop that finesse and more texture are the guys who started playing in small clubs.
Right.
When you play in small clubs, you just look at the room and you adjust. I still do it. If somebody calls me in to play something, especially out here, I look at the room, I look at the walls, how much glass there is or isn't. I adjust my playing and say, uh-oh, that's dangerous. We have to adjust to that. There was a club in Sherman Oaks called Cozy's. We did a lot of jam sessions there with Jimmy Vivino from the Conan O'Brien Band.
Wow.
And the room was wonderful because it had a lot of Dubutin draping, black curtain drapes, and it was just absorbed, and it was so easy. Now, most places that I played in, and for some reason, the sonics and the acoustics are the last things that are thought about, except, of course, in places like the Hollywood Bowl, where it's all acoustic and it's dealing with all kinds of bands and a Philharmonic, and they're thinking sound number one out the door. But a lot of places, they set up a club or they set up this, and they really don't consider the acoustics of what the club is producing. And that seems to be predominant throughout the entire country and countries.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? Just we have state-of-the-art systems now. People take it for granted, don't understand that. Why do you think that is?
Well, I just don't think I don't think much thought is given to it. They go, well, we're going to have music. Well, if you're going to have music, you might want to think about the acoustics. But they don't. They think about the ambiance, of course, should be good and set up of the room and how everything is placed. But usually, for an exception of a few rooms, the sonics are thought of last. Should be the other way around. I'm not going to single anybody out. There's a club up in my hometown called the Sportsman, and I know Dwayne, the owner. They turned that room into the musician's paradise.
Beautiful.
It sounds great because they knew they had to make it acoustically fit everyone in the entire room. And they got 2 floors and an upstairs, and it sounds just as good in both places, and it absorbs the sound and it works. Let me bring up something else, though.
Please.
This is crazy, and I'm not sure if people have realized this or really brought a light on this thing, but think about this. The Beatles hit like it was what? Late January 63.
Yes.
They hit with I Want to Hold Your Hand. It was starting to break out, right? If you see some of those early black and white films and videos of the Beatles playing those early concerts, do you realize they did not have monitors? I mean, just think about that for a minute. Give it some thought.
It actually makes me completely exhilarated to hear. I know they didn't. And
Look, here's my point.
Yeah.
What those guys and then the Stones and the entire British invasion, what they came up with, what they came along at the right time, at the right period of time in history. They did their homework, lots of it, and I am so glad they came along when they did, because the entire industry got a shot in the arm. But it became so big. Here's the point I'm trying to make. What the Beatles created, they didn't have. They created a vehicle and they never rode in it. We rode in it.
Right.
The bands of the 70s did. Those guys, really, when they performed, now think about this, that when they performed at Shea Stadium, there was no miking. They put microphones in front of their amplifiers and put them through the little bell horns that were connected to the beams that were holding up the roof of Shea Stadium. In other words, when we went out with the Steve Miller Band and played Day on the Green in Oakland Coliseum, we had $1 million system by Shoko.
Exactly.
And we blasted, and we sounded like those guys, you realize, did not have that. I find that to be tragic.
Well, no. First of all, I think it's one of those things where, I mean, they fell apart as a band, but I think it's beautiful that they built this car and left it for a whole generation. It became very gluttonous and obviously almost, but still, it's like to me, that's just like, what do you think I mean, don't you think part of I don't know, I wasn't at Shea Stadium. I guess the sound must have been, I just remember when I interviewed Cropper, and when they were looking, him and Duck Dunn were searching for a drummer, and obviously they wanted Willie Mitchell's drummer, Al Jackson. And Al said at the time they were playing these sock hops and these dance halls, and Al's like, listen, man, you just got to look like you know what you're doing because nobody can hear anything past the first two rows. I mean, they were playing out of the worst PA systems ever. I mean, it's really a remarkable. This is the other thing I wanted to ask you about. Purdy told me, can you just riff on in-ear monitors? To me, it's, Purdy said absolutely drummers should not be wearing in-ear monitors in the studio. All the hit records he was on were because of dynamics, and when you have the in-ear monitors, you lose all of that. And I just wanted you to riff.
Well, that's completely, totally arguable from the top to the bottom. You have people that have stood on both sides of that line and have accomplished great recordings. Now, let me. I'm not going against Purdy. That works for him. Let me go to the other side.
Please. You're doing. I love you going to the other side.
All right. First of all, we would adjust our sound in the clubs. I would set up my band, even with Raven, in the little clubs. My bass player, Tom Calandra, played through. He was ahead of the game. He played through two 100-watt tops, and he had two Fender Bassman amps, two 15s, and another set of two 15s surrounding my bass drum. In other words, if you looked at the stage, my bass drum was in the middle. Tom's two amps were over to the left and then over to the right. The bass and the bass drum came from the same place on the stage like a recording. That's why we blew a lot of the bands out. It was powerful.
Wow.
Now, then they got into, let's take up the whole stage. We'll put the bass and segregate the bass and the bass amp over here and the drums over there. To me, that became anemic unless you had a show company or a sound company like Shoko and some of the other ones that could take and melt that into a CD, a real vinyl recording and make it sound in the house like it's a recording. You could separate and be on the stage wherever you are. But prior to that enormity of size of venue, yes, you could fill it back out because then you had, $1 million worth of amperage and somebody on that board that could mix it like a record. No fault. But if you got caught in between, it didn't work. I never liked when you tried to use that whole stage and move your bass amp away from the drum set. I'm going, well, look, unless somebody's going to pick up that sound, we're going to sound bad. We should sound like we come from the same part of the stage. A lot of bar bands could not make the transition into the concert world simply from that factor because they separated from each other. They weren't in a tight situation like it used to be in those clubs, which were always my favorite. And all the jazz bands played tight. They could hear each other and they could rebound off of each other. So until you made that transition with people that could handle it in the house, it could create problems with the band and with the sound. So it jumped back and forth. So you had, if you were going to use that stage tight, it was one thing. If you were going to separate everybody, it had to be picked up in the house. That's what I saw. Now, when we were making our records, the engineers then, before they got a sound that was coming through our speaker playbacks, when we were coming up to that point, they made sure it sounded like a record in our headphones first. That's crucial. I just wanted to bring that up. What I was hearing 99% of the time from those engineers was a record mix. Oh, bring the drums up, bring the bass up. That's it. Great. Could you put a little bit of echo on the voice? Thank you. Bring the keyboard down. Great. Oh, wow. That headphone sounded like a stereophonic mix before we went after the track. I just want to make note of that. However Purdy did it, and what he had to deal with was his era of time.
And again, we're just having a conversation. There's no right or wrong. It's completely arguable.
Yeah.
But I wanted to read you the exact quote. He said, this is interesting, and not necessarily related to you, because I feel like your generation of drummers, because the drums were such an accompanist instrument, that anyway, this is what he said. He said, here's one piece of advice for drummers. Whatever you do, do not put drums in the monitor. The worst thing you can do is put drums in the monitor, because when that happens, you're going to hear yourself and bam, you're already behind the beat. You need to be able to hear what is on the stage. You don't really need a monitor, because if you listen to where you hear everybody on the stage, you play with dynamics. How did you not listen to with in-ear monitors, that's the thing, is that people start to become, they're so concerned about not being able to hear themselves. They want to hear themselves, but then they're dragging. They're behind the beat. And I just wanted you to talk about that.
Okay. Part of that is true, and part of that didn't work in my case, because in the beginning, when the bands were tighter on stage, didn't need a monitor.
Sure.
I'll go with that.
Yeah.
As soon as people started to separate, and I mean separate, I'm used to my bass player being right on my hi-hat side, and we could move. That's what Lonnie did when we were cutting all those great records with Steve in the studio in San Francisco. Lonnie was right on the baffle, right above me, and we were within, 4 feet of looking at each other and talking.
I just love that. Just like Keltner and Rainey did the same thing with Josie on Steely Dan. Go ahead, continue.
Exactly,
Yep.
Exactly. So, but once you're live and you start separating everybody to make it look great, it's got to look great on the. Okay, yeah, I use the stage and spread out. Okay, I understand that. Now you have a different set of latency. It happens. There's latency everywhere. So what Purdy said, yes, and kind of a no. Because once you create distance, you create latency. And that's where the dragging or the tempo problems may be occurring, because that's just natural science. That's science. It's just the way it is. It's like a Doppler effect. It's like, well, why is it loud when it's, a certain tone when it's coming at me, and then when it's going away, it drops its tone? Well, that's the Doppler shift. That's science. That's the way the cosmos is put together, and it is put together the same way as far as distance from each other on the stage. It's just something you have to deal with. And I try to keep my bands tight as much as we can, even with Miller, trying to fill up that stage, playing in front of 75,000 people at the football stadiums. We still kept a tightness. So
that's
exactly the amount that was needed and no more. Today, when I'm out there doing these wonderful concerts with A.J. Croce, I do not have drums in the monitor. I don't need them.
Right.
We keep tight.
I love it.
I don't need them. Yeah.
How big are the venues? How big are the venues?
Oh, they could be anywhere from 500 seats up, and a couple of them were 2,000 seaters.
Right.
I mean, we just scored something big. It was AJ's first chart record. We knocked out the whole record a year and a half ago in Nashville, and one of the songs jumped off the album and became a #1 Billboard country chart single. I can't believe it, but it did. So I was like, wow, great, okay, fine. That's better for life.
Yep.
We'll take it.
Yep.
And let's keep the band tight. And, it's based around, his dad's songs, and AJ's quite talented. And the stuff that he comes up with, and his piano's his first instrument, but he plays guitar for his father's songs and sings all the tunes. And he's got a very kind of New Orleans style of singing, and he understands every category of music, every single category. I mean, he'll sit there and start playing Scott Joplin and play it right. There you go.
The tune that made the charts. I mean, was it basically like one hit? Everybody kind of an old school methodology, or was
it was kind of a little more like folk country.
I love it.
I was using brushes.
Yeah.
And it was, it was a country lope to it.
I love it.
And we went through the quick, and then who lives in Nashville now, came in and put the guitar leads on top and all the fills was Robin Ford.
A dear friend. I love the man. Yeah, great cat.
Yeah, Robin did great, and the record moves beautifully. It plays well on the radio. It's kind of radio. What's
the name of the song? What's the name of the song?
It's called Better Day, from the album By Request. The album that we made was made on the premise of the people that would come to AJ's house and hang out late at night and request him to play certain tunes. Well, he took notes, and he said, these 10 songs keep coming up. People want to hear these, so why don't we just record them? Okay. And we did. We did all of them, like 11 songs or 12 in 4 days. We just wrapped them out. And one of the songs left off the album, and they picked up on it, and away we went. Straight ahead. It's not complicated. It's straight ahead stuff, but it plays beautifully on radio.
Well, we have another name that voice. Again, drummers don't get a chance to see each other when they're in high demand, but pay attention to the content, and we'll come back and break it down.
Okay.
Jack DeJohnette introduced me to Miles, and so I ended up starting to work in the studio with Miles. And what I learned from those experiences was that Miles was an artistic director. He knew how to match up the player, the musician, to the music. So when he called you for a project, he already knew what you were going to play. He knew that what was there would be perfectly set for you, pretty much. And so whatever you're going to give him, it's in your wheelhouse. You know this is going to be fun. Hence, things like Jack Johnson, which was like, again, it wasn't supposed to happen. It was an accident. It was a 25-minute accident. Everything we had, I can't even remember what we rehearsed, because all Miles had said in the studio when we got there was, remember what you played last night? And I was so petrified, I said, yeah, and I lied. He said, show me. And I tried to play. He said, that's not what you played last night. I said, oh. He said, but I like that. Play that. So I did. Meanwhile, while I'm waiting to play this particular pattern, Miles and Tio and Stan Tonkel are trying to get balances or trying to figure out something in the studio room, in the engineer's room, and McLaughlin starts to play this groove, which ended up being part of some stuff we did with Mahavishnu, part of some stuff that was being done with Tony's band, Lifetime, which had done it before Mahavishnu. And the end, we just started playing this shuffle with and of course perfect with Michael Henderson shuffle. It's all, I mean, it's that's, you can't do much more than that.
Mr. Mallaber, you want to take a guess at who that is?
Okay, okay. Let me bring the bands up. For a minute there, I got to, let me explain something.
Yeah.
I got to see the original Weather Report, believe it or not, in a club that was exclusively a jazz club called the Lighthouse in Hermosa Beach.
Oh, I love it.
Way back. The original lineup.
Al Muzon,
For a minute
Miroslav.
there, I thought that was Eric Gravatt.
Gravatt? You're telling me, hold on, Gravatt was before Al Muzon?
Yes.
Wow. Okay, continue.
I'm pretty sure. I could be. I don't. Yeah.
Mouzone. Here's what happened. This is a crazy story. I think
I have two more crazier stories than you do. Go ahead.
no, I just because I interviewed Miroslav, and the original band had Al Mouzone. When they got off their first tour, Mouzone called Shorter, whose wife was pregnant and about to give birth, and Mouzone said, has your wife given birth to that motherfucker yet? And Shorter had to fire him, and that's when they brought in Gravatt. So anyway, but go ahead.
Okay, well that was the band I saw at the Lighthouse.
Sure.
But going on, I'm off shooting now.
Yeah, it's fine.
Of all that band, I met. It was Joe Zawinul was there.
Sure.
Miroslav, he was there, and I remember it was Eric Gravatt on drums. So maybe I could be wrong on that one, but to me that was one of the original makeups of that band.
Absolutely.
But the point with that whole band is my favorite track. My favorite track actually is the Jocko's playing drums on it. And it's Swingtown, or not Swingtown. He's playing a hi-hat pattern.
Really?
And I'm oh my God, what is the name of that song?
Sweet Nighter?
I'll find it.
Yeah, no, I mean we're gonna need. I need to get this clarified immediately. Anyway,
I'll get that.
Yeah.
I'll get that because I've been so far away from that world.
I know. I want to get you back into that world.
Yeah. Now jumping over to Miles.
Yeah.
It was the drummer. Of course, Miles got into his electric stage because I talked to who was my bass player for a while. He played bass with me on a whole bunch of stuff. He played bass with Miles on the Bitches Brew Tour.
Harvey Brooks?
What? Harvey Brooks.
Oh, I love Harvey Brooks. God, a legend. It was
Harvey Brooks. Played on an album with me, really quick offshoot here.
Yeah, please. I love this.
So I believe the drummer that I was hearing is from that era. Am I correct?
You are absolutely correct. That drummer was Billy Cobham.
Okay. I was going to take a shot because a couple people came in and out of that chair. Okay?
You're absolutely right. Absolutely. You know what it was? It was the reason I played you that was because when I interviewed McLaughlin, 2 days after he landed in New York, Tony Williams took him. Chick Corea had hipped Miles to John, and they get in the studio, and it turned out to be in a silent way. And Miles whispered in his ear, "Play the guitar like you don't know how to play the guitar." And it totally threw McLaughlin off. And then with Billy, he's like, "What'd you play last night?" And Billy's like, this. And he's like, "No, you didn't." He's like, "But I like that. Play that." It did the accident.
I got a related story.
Go ahead. Yeah, that's why I played it for you.
My point. Miles got influenced by Sly and the Family Stone.
That's right.
And he saw the guys becoming rock gods. And to me, Miles was a jazz god. Now, to go from a jazz god to a rock god, and I'm just, I'm trying to stay light with this whole stuff.
Yeah.
That's a different three-ring circus to me. That's a whole nother, hold on a minute now, that's a whole nother set of chord changes. That's a whole nother set of velocity and amperage and rhythm pattern and especially chord embellishments. The guys in rock, except for one or two songs out of the entire catalog, do not use those chord changes. Do not use those chord embellishments. I know, I study them, and they don't. Once you start going to those chords, the one band that went there a little bit was Steely Dan, but you're not going to hear the metal bands go there. They don't use those structures. So this is interesting. I'm not saying yes or no to that, or I'm not condemning any of it.
Of course.
It's more like understanding science. You go, wait a minute, this is another solar system. It really is.
But I want to go back to something just based on more like psychology and like, okay, just take Billy Cobham. He had been on the road with Horace Silver. He was Creed Taylor's main drummer. He had played with Billy Taylor at the Hickory House for years. He was a seasoned drummer. The thing about the two words that stuck out in that clip were Miles was an artistic director because he knew how to throw these guys out of their traditional mindsets, whatever they were thinking. He'd throw them so into another realm. I mean, McLaughlin called him a Zen master. And I just wanted you to talk about, like, if there was anybody in your career in the studio that did that, where they just sort of jolted you, and all of a sudden you're like, what is he talking about? And then you just played, and something like Jack Johnson, like that's what Cobham said. He freaked him out so much that it became this 25-minute accident.
Well, my point with that whole story was when he told John McLaughlin to play like you don't know how to play the guitar, I think he was trying to say, play some rock.
That's right. You're absolutely, dude, you nailed it.
But it's not a put down. I didn't mean that as a put down.
No.
Because I don't like when people compare those two idioms. Those are two different solar systems to me.
Yeah, you're right.
It has nothing to do with intelligence. I mean, early rock and roll, yes. I watched people, the Wrecking Crew took it on the head. And the early rock and roll was like, that was a great era for jazz, and it was a great era of very sophisticated music and chord changes. Along comes rock and roll, and it was like, okay, this is gonna change it all up. Sorry, but we're gonna break the furniture. And that's kind of like how it got treated, but not anymore. Miles was, I've got two Miles Davis. To back you up, I've got something, and I will not mention names.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I will not mention names. But what Miles was doing with John was, at that time, I watched him, and I said, I think Miles wants to be a rock star. And since rock and roll does not have any one firm definition of music, it's still not defined. There is no rule. Rock and roll can mean 20 different definitions, all right and all somewhat wrong. Okay, we can argue forever. I'm not going to do that. All I'm saying is you know what I'm saying.
I did. No, I did.
He put on his glasses. He started doing he didn't come out in a suit and a tie like in the 60s and with tab collar shirts and thin ties and a nice, real cool GQ suit. That was gone. The world had changed, and Miles was moving toward it. So I think what he then wanted to do was bring some of that rock attitude into his music so it would mix up and mix. You call it fusion if you want. I don't call it that. It's too dangerous. He just wanted to mix colors, right? That's what I was seeing. So that's what I learned from Harvey Brooks quick story relating to Steve Miller Band. Way back, before I brought anything to Steve Miller, somewhere in between my first album and there with Ben Sidran, he said, hey, I've got an artist we're going to be working on in Boston. Can you come in and play? His name is Paul Pina. He's got these great songs. He looks like a blind Jimi Hendrix. I said, oh, my God, this is great. Who's on bass? Harvey Brooks, you, me, and we got Paul Pina on guitar. Paul Pina wrote Jet Airliner. The original track of Jet Airliner we cut before Ben and me brought it to Steve Miller. Then we did our rendition. The original record is on Paul Pina's original album, which is so good, soulful, really cool. Anyway.
Wait a minute. Dude, you got it. You're blowing my mind. Paul. So Sidran.
No, that's true.
Sidran. Who was the one that approached you about Pina?
Ben produced the album. A studio in Boston said, we're going to produce this guy, Ben, we want you to produce it, and we're going to record him here. Pick your drummer, pick your bass player, and here's what we're doing. Boom. Paul Pina's material, his songs, his guitar playing, me on drums, Harvey Brooks on bass, beautiful. We went in, we did it, okay? One of the songs, we did the original version of Jet Airliner, which is slower and funkier. And then that was brought to Steve Miller. A couple of years later, we cut the new version that became the other hit. And Steve bought Paul Pina's publishing.
Dude, I'm looking at it. New Train, it was called. New Train, December 73.
There you go.
Oh
now,
my God.
My point is, I'm leading to a Miles Davis
Do it,
story
baby.
through Harvey Brooks.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to mention any other names. And he told me the story about Miles on the stage, which backs up what you said about Miles, except it's an opposite view. That one night, he's got a new horn player up, new tenor player, new sax player, and oh wow, I'm editing the story and I am not mentioning
It's
names.
fine.
Okay?
It's fine.
Okay, please, I will not do that. No,
it's fine.
And the sax player was like, in 7/7, man, I'm doing a gig with Miles Davis. We'd all feel like that, of course. And he goes, they're on stage. He's doing the solo, and he finished the solo. And Miles looked over and he goes and he smiled and he goes, oh man, this is great. Life can't get any better. I'm on stage with Miles, and he just loved my solo.
He's smiling at me.
Next night,
oh boy,
same thing approximately, and he sees, after his solo, he sees Miles look at him, then walk towards him, and he said, "Oh man, this is going to be great." Miles leaned over and said in his ear, "You played that last night." You got it?
I did.
You played that last night. In other words, thank you.
Stop playing the same crap. Yeah, stop playing what you played last night. Yeah.
His 4 words in a raspy voice, you played that last night. In other words, okay, I liked what you played the night before, but now make it different.
Dude, and so you know what? That's a beautiful story.
Up Miles' artistry. That's his artistry from night to night. I'm just backing up what you said.
Was Van? I mean, was Van like that, or Steve at all, or was it much more sort of? I mean, Miles. That's just a classic example, and it's still to this day a really beautiful guitar player that I just interviewed, Scott Metzger. He was talking about the same playing on stage with a band, ripping off a guitar solo. The crowd went nuts. The next night, he played it again. The drummer looked at him and he goes, "Why the fuck did you play it again like that?" So that has continued through the years, And did you have an experience with a leader? It doesn't have to be any of the major cats, but did you have an experience with a leader like that?
Never anything negative with any of my guys, except I will say with Van Morrison. Van Morrison is quite a different fellow.
Yes, okay? He is,
and quite a different person, and I got to hang out with him and spend some really precious time with Van. And he's a loner, and whatever he went through in his childhood with his parents is his own personal story. I know some of that stuff might have upset him, and all of it. I'm not going to get into any specifics, but fine. Things like that turn you into the person you become.
Absolutely.
And there's no other way around that. So Van pretty much, built his own world, and he was always very congenial in the studio and accepting with his players. At least he was with me. But there was never a time that the band, we knew with the Moondance Band, we knew we were playing a good set. But we never really got a compliment from Van. And we accepted that as like, well, that's kind of the way it's going to be. And after I did all my recording in the studio and played back, he didn't spend hours listening to playback. We did. But, not that I needed it, but we never got an accolade like, oh, man, that's great what you came up with. It was just accepted that that's the way it was going to be, no harm done, and you just move on.
Dig.
And that's not bad at all. That's just an acceptable form of personality.
Absolutely. I mean, the idea is that, it's like, well, I guess if he's not saying anything, then we're doing a pretty good job. That's okay.
Yeah, and actually, to round out that story, once Moondance was finished and sequenced and put out, and it was starting to be covered, and people were going, something going on here, but we can't really categorize this thing. What's going on here? Well, it's receiving more accolades and more time on the radio, every song now, than it ever did. That's all I can say. It just something about, when you get something right, if you really work at it and you really get something right, at least to your heart and your soul at the time you're doing it, it's really right. And if it goes on and it continues to last through the times and the decades, and they keep coming back to it, and it still gets airplay, then it must be right.
You're exactly right.
Something
nailed it. That's Mallaber poetry right there.
Something must have gone on that made it right. Something must have happened, and it's that's why I say, if look, you do a job, no matter what it is, you do the best you can so the building doesn't fall apart.
That's right.
You do the best you can at the time given, and then look. I tell everybody, look, all I've learned in composition and dealing with so much material, that songs are creatures, and they have a life of their own, and you will never rope them down. They are just going to be the creatures they are going to be, and depending on who performs them and who touches them and who gives them a different treatment, they become another creature. And they have a life of their own. They're going to do what they are going to do through the ages, whether you like it or not. A song that was written in the 30s called I Only Have Eyes for You was touched again by a great band called the Flamingos, and they added their touch in 1959 to that song, and before you knew it, it was the doo-wop hit of the century.
Incredible.
And that song was written in the 30s. So that's what I'm talking about. Treatment, rendition, how somebody, reinterprets that piece of material. That thing, I swear by that statement. I just swear by songs having a life of their own.
Well, I mean, the shelf, it plays out. It just plays out right in front of our eyes. I mean, it's like,
yeah.
I had to read this to you because it's his birthday, and it's going to lead into my next question, but he's talking about the idea, and I think it was so interesting that you talked about Miles not using the word rock, but wanting McLaughlin to play rock. And this is from my interview with Buzzy Featon. Happy birthday, Buzzy, by the way.
By the way,
yeah.
I did tell you I'm on that Full Moon record with Buzzy, with the guys, and I love that record we did. I got to tell you that
yeah, okay. I'm partial to the original one with Dinwiddie and Wilson. But, I want to. This is yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go.
Yeah. So this is what he said about McLaughlin. It ties into what we were just talking about. He said John McLaughlin was my hero because he played so funky and so outside, and he was so adventurous. If you look at pictures of John back in '69, he looked like an accountant. He had a suit and tie. He was coming from that hardcore jazz thing. But he had some other thing going on that was so cool. I tried to cop as much as I could from him because he knew where to put the time and he knew how to phrase rhythm parts. He was incredibly funky. If you listen to McLaughlin's parts on Bitches Brew, his soloing is off the chain. But listen to his rhythm stuff. He's just brilliant. He took Miles's instructions to heart. Miles said, play like you can't play. And McLaughlin got it. He was putting stuff on the offbeat. He was choosing voicings that were really odd. Miles was playing a lot of the Phrygian mode. It's got a flat 2 and a flat 6. That mode is all over Bitches Brew. McLaughlin would find those Phrygian flat 2 voicings and pound the shit out of them. He wasn't shy about it. That's what got my attention. Just be confident.
Right.
Just be all in. That's what McLaughlin is doing. Anyway, he was talking about just playing rhythm with the same intensity and confidence. But going back, I think that's what you just were talking about. Miles wanted him to play rock. He was totally influenced by Sly. Well, you're right. 100%.
Yeah, and that was my interpretation of it. Now, in using that word, and look, I'm basically classically trained. I started studying piano at 12, but not to play Mozart, just for orchestrational purposes.
Sure.
That's all I wanted to know. And, all I'm saying here is Mostly in jazz, you're finding chords that are really embellished, and they go beyond outside, what the chords are usually made up of in rock. They're because the songs in rock and roll do a certain thing and they go a certain way, and the beauty in both of them is me. There's beauty in both of them, but for completely different reasons.
That's right.
And it has nothing to do with intelligence. It has to do with, I no longer tell anyone, look, that's a great movie, you should go see it. Nope. Or, look, this song is really great. I don't do that anymore. I stopped a long time ago because it doesn't work.
Yeah, you're right.
I love it. It's not good advice. It's not good advice because the way we are made up as people, the intricacies of that, who connects with what, is beyond understand. Why something I can hear a pattern, a chord pattern, and I'm gone. Has nothing to do with anything else I'm hearing. Gone. Huh. And I don't know why. I go, whoa. Years back, there was a band. There's still a band called Snow Patrol. They had a big hit called "Chasing Cars." When I first heard that song, if you're not familiar with it, it got big because they played it on. It became part of Grey's Anatomy, and it was woven into the entire.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
When you hear it and you go, when I first heard it, and I said, "Oh, what's going on here?" And then something caught, and I said, "Wait a minute, one more time." By the third time, I said, "I can't believe they did what they did with 3 notes." I couldn't believe what they pulled off. I really couldn't. I said, whoever put that together is a flipping genius. How did they pull that off? I go and I examined it, and I went, and then it comes in, and the full band comes in, and the drums are rock steady, just right on, and it just drives home, and I'm going, wow, did they now? That tune means as much to me as the first time I heard Giant Steps.
Totally.
See? For a totally different set of reasons. Completely different set of reasons. I can't explain. Can't do it. And then I could turn around and listen to a little simple ballad and go, oh, my God. I want to be there the day they recorded it and see what they did. How did they do it? How did they pull it off? Completely different set of reasons. And I don't find a lot of people equipped like that. The songs are so different for so many different reasons. How do you justify the same thread that I push through each one of those songs? I can't explain it. I just live with it, and I'm not sure if I'm cursed or blessed. I have no idea yet. I haven't come to that conclusion.
Well, no, I think you're. You're fine. You're good. You're good. I mean, but part of it is just. Part of it's also like, this is earlier in your life, but it's just sort of like, it's the Socratic method that you must know what you don't know and be okay with that. Like, it's okay to not have a scientific explanation as to why things move you that are completely different. I also think it's really important to let people come up with their own opinions without sort of pulling their coattails to it. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, did you wind? I mean, I know you were dwelling in Woodstock. I have to believe that you were at the Joyous Lake hanging with Levon and Butterfield and those. Did that ever happen for you with Buzz and those guys?
I was there hanging out with a different group. I was there hanging out with Van and his circle of people. Some of the guys hung out with each other, but some of the guys, there was a little bit of attitude displayed on who was hip enough to hang out with who. You got to be careful with that.
Wait, who was the?
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
Yeah, you got to be careful with that one. I will not mention names. No. But you got to be careful with that one because they had their pecking order. Let's just say the world of jazz certainly had its pecking order, and so did the world of rock.
And Van had his own house, and you guys were it was the Moon Dance Band, and you guys were kicking it up there and just working on material.
Nobody really knew what we were making. Nobody knew what was going on.
I love it.
Until years later, really. And I get phone calls and little email I'm not on Facebook, but I get emails and stuff from people that reach me and they go, "Did you guys know what you were making back then?" Well, kind of, but you don't know the actual effect it's going to have on people, and certainly not how long it may or may not last. Because I seem to be on a number of recordings that are receiving an inappropriate amount of airplay. And I'm going, wow. I mean, I don't even mention Fly Like an Eagle anymore because, I don't.
Did you know Jackie Lomax up there?
I did not.
Okay.
No, I knew John Sebastian.
Great cat.
And I knew Levon a little bit, although we didn't hang out. I knew of Robbie Robertson, but that was from years ago. I knew the people around Butterfield's band, the Albert Grossman circle of people, and some of the studio guys. But once Van left, then I followed him out, and before you knew it, we were in Marin County.
I just want to be clear. You knew Robbie from the Hawks band with the cat that was in the original Hawks. Was that right?
Yeah. Robbie would know me somewhat. He would know me just because of the earliest days of that band. I actually saw them play when I was like 16, and they were playing at Port Dover or Summer Gardens or something like that, and it was Ronnie Hawkins. And they were, they looked just like the early days of looking at Booker T and the MGs. Those guys had their, black mohair suits on and their thin ties and their tab collar shirts. It was totally that era of playing, and they rocked beautiful. It was really something. And my connection with all that and seeing that certainly had an effect.
I have one more voice to play for you in this set, and then we'll come back.
Okay.
Well, I ended up, going into rehab, and I had to, move out of New York. And, I had been playing, under the influence for so long that I wasn't sure what was going to happen, but, because of when I finally did get, go back and play, I have good friends in the business, and being able to go back to music straight and still and love playing and be in the same situations with people and not use anymore. It was good, and it was great to have that. I could have lost it all, and I didn't. And so, being able to come back to music, looking back on it, helped save my life. Drugs, I don't think they make you play better, but they can ease whatever pain you're going through to help you be able to concentrate on something that makes you feel good.
Gary Mallaber, I'm just going to tell you who that is. That was one of my...
Wait a minute, New York State? Is that a New York State guy?
Yeah, let me just be very, very... I'll give you a hint. He was playing at the Pithod Club with Tony Levin every night. And is that
Gad?
That's Gad. That's my first interview with Gad.
Well, Gad.
And before you go any further, to me, it was that interview was done 7 years ago, and I asked him about a time in his life when he faced adversity and how music was a help or a hindrance, and he could have given me some candy cane answer. He went right to the heart of it, and I just wanted to, before you go off on, I'm sure that you guys, we haven't even talked about the Mangione brothers yet, but the thing is that I just feel like I'm just wondering about Mallaber and when you got the memo that how you're still here today, how you avoided the carnage, because there were a lot of cats that were roadkill at a certain point, and Steve he was playing his ass off and the most in-demand studio drummer, and he was totally a junkie, and he could have lost everything. And I just wanted to ask you about, in your own career, how you've learned to traverse that whole thing, because drugs.
Oh, I can answer that.
Go ahead.
Sure, I can answer that. First of all, I knew I said it was a New York State guy. I could hear his accent.
Absolutely.
And it's crazy. It's ironic that Buffalo, New York, and Rochester, New York, are 75 miles away from each other.
Bastions.
We never met.
Never met.
We never met. We never sat down and talked. He has much more celebrity than I do, but the records he played on and the records I played on, I'm sure he admires what he did. The records I played on, I wouldn't trade one of them for anything else. I was so lucky. But let me tell you what happened.
Go ahead.
I watched people at an early age go down. I mean, just fall off the horse and just crack their head on the cement and go down, and it scared the hell out of me. Now, why and when that happened and for what reasons, some other part of the cosmos had to have a reason for that happening, but it scared the hell out of me. Because I watched their assortment of friends lift them up, pick them up off the ground and go, okay, come on, little birdie, let's try to fly again. But I didn't have that entourage. I didn't have that. So I said, if I fall, I don't think anybody's going to pick me up. Not because they don't like me or because it's just, I don't see it. I don't see the rescue, whether it comes from people around me or even myself. So let me find something else. I can't go there, ever. Nor did I ever try. I just watched people lose it. And, that one little thing that stayed with me is like, boy, you got a little modicum of talent. You might want to use it and develop it. But I watched a lot of it get wasted, and I thought it was fairly tragic. And it scared me. I mean, I chickened out. I don't know. No.
You just got spooked straight. Yeah.
I just didn't see it. It didn't have anything to do. First of all, I had no stage fright. I didn't give a shit about what anybody thought. I just got up there and played. I mean, look, I was with a band that opened up 3 nights with Zeppelin, and we didn't care. We just did it. So that's who we were. But I was scared. I would watch people just lose it, and I'm going, oh man, I'd like to remember what I played the night before. It's possible I might want to use it again. Possible, or I'd like to remember the evening or remember the day. And I was never around anybody that moved that stuff or pushed it. Right. I somehow I declined. And somehow I just averted my entire being to some other circle. I didn't allow that in my circle. And I was bent on getting something to happen. I mean, from the earliest age, I just said, look, all I want to do is make records. I want to do that. I can do that, and I want to do that. And that trajectory really was never faltered. I just stayed on it from sheer fright.
I mean, did you? I mean, I'm just without getting. I mean, just because.
I wasn't
Do you
trying to be
do you
Captain
consider
America.
do you consider yourself having like a spiritual compass of any kind? Did you practice meditation or anything? To me, it's like the road can eat you alive, and especially in those early days.
Well, the road can eat you alive, but it didn't come from a book, and I wasn't trying to be Captain America either. I really wasn't. I mean,
no, you're just being Gary Mallaber, man.
Hey guys, I don't know how one look. I talk to people a lot about our generation and the generation prior to us. Look, I credit every big band and little band playing swing and jazz to bring us where it brought us. I'd watch my parents and my dance jitterbug to jazz swing band. It converted. So did Springsteen. The same thing happened in that house. It converted. We move forward. Whether we like it or not, we move forward. When we went from analog to digital, everybody was, okay, well, look, we're Americans. We could make anything happen. We could make anything work. That's who we are as a people. I'm not being political here. I'm just telling you what we do with what we're given.
I dig.
Okay?
Yep.
This is what we're given. Okay, I'll make it work. I still want to make records. That's what I want to do. I feel I can do it. I can understand what I'm hearing. Therefore, I'm going to do that. And I say to her, back to Gad. I never met Gad. We never sat down and talked. I knew the records he made. Oh, I even knew the other drummer that played when Steve wasn't around. He was off doing other stuff, and he wound up recording with Chuck Mangione. They made the album, I think it was with the hit, Feel So Good.
Feel So Good, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that was James Bradley Jr. I met James Bradley Jr. in the studio when he was playing with Alice in Chains.
Wow.
Yeah. He was the guy that was playing, because the engineer was Mick Kozowski, and Mick's my good friend from Rochester. We used to record in Buffalo. And Mick said, oh, yeah, that's Chuck with the other drummer, because Steve was off doing some other stuff, and it was James Bradley Jr. And they cut the big Feel So Good, the funk jazz tune. Even that tune, even that was moving rhythmically. That was, it was jazz, but it was really a funk, more of a funk groove. It didn't have a swing groove. So everything was shifting. See? Go back and listen to the track, and you go, oh.
Yeah, I'm going to do it. I love where you're coming. Dude, Mallaber, we just burned through another 70 minutes. Let's breathe through the weekend, but let's continue next week if you want, if you're up for it.
Okay. I'm good until Wednesday. Then I've got to go out. We're doing 10 concerts with A.J. Croce. I'm taking my portable studio with me, and I'm hoping to finish. I will send you all 3 of my original CDs. Would that be good?
Oh, well, and let's get another session in before Wednesday, either Monday or Tuesday. I'll email you.
All right, Monday or Tuesday. Let's try Monday or Tuesday. Shoot me an email.
Much love, dude. Later.
And then listen. You pick the topics. You pick it.
Yeah, we're just gonna keep. Yeah, we're gonna keep flying around. It's great.
Okay. Did I say anything wrong? Did you?
No. You're just speaking through through experience and truth and your truth. It's all good, man.
Thank you.
Cheers, man.
I appreciate it.
Later.
Okay.
Peace.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Part 2 in the books with Gary Mallaber. Honest, amazing drummer, and we're glad he's still with us and hope for him to be with us for many, many years to come. We'll be back with Bill Craig on the other side. This is the Jake Feinberg Show.